Georgia Bulldogs are currently 17-point favorites against the LSU Tigers from the SEC championship being held in Atlanta. And that number just keeps going higher and higher in favor of Georgia. And my first instinct whenever I see a 17-point favorite in the SEC championship game is just hold your horses, everybody. Now, Stetson Bennett, obviously, at least it's obvious to me that he plays to the level of competition that he's playing against. When he played against Tennessee, he played the best game of his career. And then against Georgia Tech, he was looking like he could get away with a lot of things absolutely outstanding. And they are the number one team in the country for a reason. And LSU just suffered a really, really ugly loss to Texas A&M. But you're crazy if you think that LSU isn't going to be, pumped up and ready to go for this game with the opportunity to knock down the number one team in the country. But Drew, kicking it to you, whenever you see your Georgia Bulldogs as 17-point favorites with that number rising, what's your initial reaction? How do you feel about that point spread?
Yeah, they say all the time college football is about matchups, right? When you look at LSU and you look at their offensive pieces and their playmakers, Jaden Daniels, first of all, he hasn't been playing well the past couple of games. Now, Jaden Daniels, I think, is one of the most explosive players on LSU, and that's not really saying a lot. LSU does have great receivers, but Jaden Daniels, he can be really explosive with his legs. However, his ability to be a consistently good passer, I think, is going to come back to bite him in this game, and I think that's why the bettors and everything are taking that into account, and the line keeps rising up, because when you look at the teams that have beat Georgia over the past few years, 2021, you had Bryce Young. 2020, you had Kyle Trask and Mac Jones. 2019, 2018, Joe Burrow. All those guys are elite passers that can really attack the Georgia secondary, and you have to be able to attack the secondary for Georgia if you're trying to beat this team. Running the ball against Georgia, you're not going to have much success with. No one has ran the ball really efficiently on Georgia in the past 4 or 5 years, or really ever since Kirby Smart got there. And you can go back and take a look, and Georgia's currently the number one rushing defense, only allowing 79 yards per game. So LSU, of course, they're going to have to try to establish a run game, but Jaden Daniels is going to have the game of his life. And he's going to have to be able to be an elite passer, throw for 300, 400 yards. And with all that being said, that just gives LSU a chance to win. Now, I'm not even saying Jaden Daniels could do all that and LSU could still lose this game. I think Georgia's just that talented this year. 17 points. If you look around, it's either between 17, 17 and a half. I've seen 18 in some areas. But that's saying a lot. When you look at this LSU offense, this is an LSU offense that only scored 13 points against Arkansas a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I know it was cold, and y'all can blame the weather as much as you want, but this Arkansas defense this year has not been good at all. So only put up 13 points in this game. I'd be really concerned if I'm LSU. If I'm only putting up 13 points against Arkansas playing against this Georgia defense, that's very worrying. And not even to mention what happened this past Saturday when they played Texas A&M. The game was never really competitive, especially late in the second half. That LSU loss to Texas A&M was embarrassing, and Brian Kelly needs to be sat down and answer the tough questions about that game. It seemed like it was a motivation issue. It seemed like they got out-schemed. You can't be losing games to Texas A&M that badly. The Texas A&M has a coach that the only reason he's still a coach there is because Texas A&M can't afford to buy him out and pay to fire him, basically.
Yeah, when I look at that ugly loss that LSU took to A&M last week, that was the first thing that came to my mind was that the players were looking, for next week's game or this week's game now. And like you mentioned, great coaches have to keep their team, dialed in on this week, on today's practice, on today's lift, on today's film. You got to win the day. And you definitely can't be looking ahead whenever you're in the SEC. That's just every team in the SEC is going to be tough. And, yeah, Texas A&M, they've struggled this season, but it's not because of a lack of talent. So the talent's there. You cannot underestimate this Texas A&M team. But whenever I look at LSU in this game, you mentioned it, Jaden Daniels is going to have to be able to get the ball to his receivers and his playmakers. Whenever he enables his receivers to make plays and just puts the ball in a position where, it's the receiver or the DB, the receivers are coming down with it. It's just Jaden Daniels' inconsistency in the intermediate and deep passing game that gets LSU in trouble. And whenever I look at this Georgia defense, they're so good at stopping the run, like you mentioned earlier with Kirby Smart. They can stop the run with the numbers disadvantage in the box, okay? Against Tennessee, they only had 4 guys in the box or 4.5 guys in the box, and we're stopping the run consistently. There's been games where they've been in trouble, a couple games they've been in trouble, but the scoreboard doesn't reflect it because they're so efficient. And I can't remember the game. I think it was the Kentucky game. They had 9 points, 3 field goals in the first half, but they only had 3 drives. So they're going to move the ball no matter what. The run game's too dominant. Their tight ends are too dominant. They use them in the run and then manipulate them and get them open in the passing game. Georgia knows what they are, and they are the best team in the country at imposing their will. Every team knows what Georgia's going to do. They're not reinventing the wheel. You just got to go out and stop it. They're going to be running 12 and 13P on offense, getting 2-3 tight ends on the field, and they're going to run the ball, and they're going to set up the play action off of that, and that's what they do. And when Stetson Bennett is on, Georgia's offense is unstoppable. It's whenever he thinks he can take his foot off the gas, and, the Georgia Tech game is most recent in my memory, but he's doing things that are uncharacteristic. He's playing outside of himself because he has so much confidence because, now he thinks he's the man, but he's a system quarterback, and he needs to realize that. And I hope when Kirby Smart dogged him after that one pick he threw against Georgia Tech, I hope that's what he told him. Dude, you're a system quarterback. You need to stay within yourself, within the system, and do what we designed this offense to do. But getting into our predictions, this game's being held in Atlanta, of course, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and it's almost become like a second home for the Georgia Bulldogs. They've played so many games there, and I used to play ball 25 minutes north of Atlanta, right off I-75. And every time I'd come back home this time of year, I'd have to pass through Atlanta, and it's just Georgia shit everywhere. Like, it's going to be basically a home game for Georgia. That's part of the reason why I think the spread's so high. But, we've mentioned it throughout this whole video. Georgia's offense is great. Even when they've been in trouble, they're still leading the game. They still look like they're in control. It's Stetson Bennett that's the biggest question mark for me offensively. Whenever he's playing to his highest potential, Georgia's unstoppable. I think Georgia's definitely going to win. I think it's going to be closer than the spread, but I don't think it's going to be too close, between 7 to 10 points. I don't think Georgia will win by more than 10. Brian Kelly's going to have his guys pissed off. I said it at the beginning of the video. These guys are going to – the LSU Tigers are going to be, ready for the opportunity to knock off the best team in the country. But I think Georgia's just too great defensively, offensively, everywhere. They're going to have to get a grip on the turnovers. Negative turnover differential from the number one team in the country. That's just a little odd, but it doesn't worry me in big games because, like I've mentioned so many times, Stetson Bennett plays up to his competition. But with all that being said, I got Georgia by between 7 to 10.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. Yeah, in LSU 100% is going to bring their best. Every team, when you go up and play Georgia, Georgia's one of the best programs in the country. They're going to get every team's best shot regardless of what that team has been through up to that point. Yes, it was a very deflating loss for the LSU Tigers, and because of that, now they're out of playoff contention. That is going to take a toll on the team mentally, I think. And it is disappointing that they lost that game because this SEC title game, I think, is pretty meaningless now. This has got to be one of the most meaningless SEC title games that come to mind for me. Georgia can lose this game and still get in. I think Georgia's just playing for seeding at this point. If they win, they'll stay at number 1, obviously, and if they lose, they'll probably drop to 3 or 4. And then obviously LSU, they're just playing for an SEC title. I think Georgia, you're going to see probably one of the better Georgia teams come in as far as the motivation goes. Georgia has been notoriously known for playing down to the competition this year. If they can't get up for the SEC title game, then the motivation factor and the coaches need to be questioned in the press conference on what is the deal. Is Georgia just getting out-schemed? Are y'all getting out-coached? Or is it a motivation factor? Now, obviously, Kirby Smart won't admit that it's a motivation issue, but it's easily seen when Georgia's playing Tennessee or Oregon, the level they're playing at, and then they go and play a Mississippi State and Kentucky. When the Georgia teams, they don't look like they want to be there. And that's concerning. And Georgia's not really been known to get off to really great starts this year either. They've had a couple games where they've put together good first halves, but they're either picking one half or the other, and I think Georgia's going to have to play a complete game, both halves, especially if they're trying to cover the spread. Now, if Georgia plays their best game, Georgia's winning by 17 points or more. There's no question about that, but this is a big game. I'm expecting mistakes. Georgia, it's just hard to pick the spread after seeing what Georgia's done the past couple weeks. I do think Georgia's talent alone is enough to beat this LSU team. Well over a touchdown. I think Georgia can win this game 14, 15 points. But that's 17 points. That's a lot of points. That's 3 whole possessions. Now, I think Georgia can obviously cover that. But for the sake of this video, for me having to pick one way or the other, I think Georgia's not going to cover, but they do win by a couple touchdowns. But with that being said, y'all, that's going to be it for this video. Let us know down below, as always, what you think is going to happen in this game and whether or not you agree or disagree with our post. We are going to do a couple more conference championships. What's today? Monday. So hopefully we might record another one tonight or tomorrow. Probably do the Pac-12 title game and then the Big 12 title game, and then we'll probably do the ACC title game maybe. But just stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever we do post those videos, and we'll see you guys in the next one.